low fire trembles in the monastery scriptorium, its glow barely enough to push back the vastness of the night. Shadows ripple across stone walls, stretching long fingers that sway as if alive. The monks move like ghosts within this chamber, their cowls drawn low, their hands steady. Quills scrape faintly upon vellum, a sound so delicate, it seems the darkness itself strains to listen. Each letter, each curve, is etched into the silence with the patience of eternity. Outside, the world holds its breath. The bell tower releases a single toll, its iron tongue echoing across frozen hills. The note dies slowly, swallowed by the hush of winter air, leaving behind only the fire's faint crackle and the whisper of turning pages. A single candle sputters, its wax dripping in uneven ridges, hardening like scars upon the oak. These are wounds of time itself, bleeding slowly into eternity. Among the towers of manuscripts, neat as soldiers standing at attention, lies one that does not belong. Its leather cover is bruised and torn, its edges uneven, its binding older than the walls that now shelter it. Across its surface, faint runes linger, marks carved long before Christ walked the roads of Galilee, long before Rome bent the world to its will. The letters seem to shift in the flickering firelight, alive in ways no ink should be. A young monk bends over it, his fingers trembling as he lifts the cover. His breath falters, catching in his throat, for though he has sworn obedience, though his life is meant for prayer and silence, something in this book pulls at him like a voice from the earth itself. His quill hovers above the parchment. He glances over his shoulder. The chamber is still. The brothers bow their heads to their own work, lost in the rhythm of transcription. Yet the silence presses against him, heavy, deliberate, as though the stones themselves are watching. He lowers the quill. Ink touches parchment. The first stroke binds him. The smell of ink is sharp, mingling with ash from the fire and the damp wool of his robes. Yet beneath it, another scent rises, subtle, earthy, like the soil turned by a gravedigger's spade. He cannot name it, but it clings to the air, seeping into the folds of his cowl, whispering into his lungs. Each line he copies is not his own. He feels it. He knows it. His hand moves, but the words are older, heavier, like stones being pulled from deep water. The candle flickers. The flame bends, though no wind stirs. A raven beats its wings against the window, the sudden thrum of feathers loud as a war drum in the stillness. The monk gasps. The quill jerks. Ink splatters across the sacred page. He stares at the stain, black bleeding into white, spreading like a wound that cannot be closed. He wipes at it, but the blot remains, an unmovable shadow across the truth. He whispers a prayer, though his voice trembles, as if unsure to whom the words are given. The manuscript closes with a whisper, soft as breath. He presses the leather shut with care, as though it might bleed if handled too roughly. He does not lift his eyes to the others. He does not speak. Instead, he rises, carrying the volume in his arms as though it were both relic and burden. His sandals scrape faintly across the stone floor as he descends the narrow corridor toward the vault. There, deep in the monastery's belly, waits the iron door. It groans as it opens, the sound like a beast roused from sleep. Within, the vault is cold, the air older than memory. Scrolls and codices rest in tidy ranks, each one a fortress of words against the erasure of time. He sets the manuscript down among them, though it does not belong. It seems to breathe where it rests, its leather flexing like the hide of some sleeping thing. He steps back, uneasy. The key turns. The lock clicks shut, and in that moment history bends, quietly, invisibly, as a reed bends to the wind. What has been copied will outlast him. It will outlast the monastery. It will outlast kings. It will outlast even faith. In the silence beyond the iron door, the book waits, not for prayer, not for devotion, but for hands yet unborn, for eyes yet unblind, for centuries to stumble upon what should have been left buried. Above, the candle gutters and dies. Darkness spreads through the scriptorium, swallowing the glow, swallowing the monks, swallowing the sound of their patient labor. Only the bell speaks again, one lonely toll, as if to mark the sealing of something that should never have been written. The raven has vanished. The young monk kneels at his desk once more, though his quill lies still. He clasps his hands, his lips moving in frantic silence. He begs for forgiveness, but even he does not know if it is for the blot of ink, or for the words he has bound to the page. His brothers chant softly in the chapel, their voices rising like smoke into the rafters, but the monk hears nothing. Only the earth note remains, low and insistent, as if something beneath the soil has stirred. Centuries will pass. Fires will consume libraries. Kings will rise and fall. Languages will vanish into dust. Yet in the locked darkness of this monastery vault, the manuscript will wait, its words patient, its power dormant, until the iron rusts and the lock yields. And when it does, the silence of the monastery will break. The vault will breathe again, and those who find it will not know whether they have uncovered wisdom or awakened something long buried. For history is not only written, it waits, it bends, it hides in ink, in ash, in shadows, and tonight, in the faint glow of a dying fire, it has been bound once more into the fragile skin of vellum, into the trembling hand of a monk who does not yet understand what he has done. The page is sealed. The door is shut. The world outside sleeps on unaware. But the silence has changed. It is no longer empty. It holds a secret that will wait for centuries, until someone dares to open the door. Rain lashes against the stone walls like whips, each drop carrying the weight of 1,000 curses. The courtyard swells with mud, thick and sucking, as the scholar trudges through it, his steps dragging like a man condemned. His cloak, heavy with water, clings to his back, and in his arms he cradles a bundle wrapped in rough cloth. He does not hold it like parchment. He holds it as one might hold a newborn, as one might shield fragile life from storm and spear. His face is pale, drawn tight with fear, for each raindrop feels like a dagger striking at the treasure he carries. Inside the fortress, the air shifts. Torchlight trembles across stone walls dampened by centuries of smoke and prayer. Shadows of saints embroidered upon tattered banners watch him as he enters, their stitched eyes hard, their faces unbending. They judge him in silence, their golden threads glowing faintly in the flicker. He feels the weight of their stares, as if the cloth itself could condemn him. The hall is loud with feasting. The nobles' laughter echoes like the baying of hounds, their goblets clashing, their mouths red with venison fat. The scent of roasted meat, sweet wine, and sweat mixes thick in the air, drowning out the faint and solemn chant of a choir from the chapel above. The voices of the holy are nearly lost beneath the gluttony of lords. No one turns to see the scholar's trembling hands. No one notices the bundle that drips rainwater onto the flagstones at his feet. With care he sets it upon a long oak table. His fingers, stiff with cold, peel back the cloth. Beneath lies not bread, not relic, but parchment bound with red thread, the seal still unbroken, marked with a sigil outlawed more than a century ago. His breath hitches. The candlelight licks across the wax, and in its glow he sees the shadow of fire. Men burned for less than this, ashes scattered for words like these. Around him laughter swells, but he hears only the pounding of his own heart. Words. Words that could strip kingdoms bare. Words that could dissolve crowns and expose lies long sewn into the tapestry of rule. Words that could unseat kings by the testimony of ink. No blade in this hall is so sharp, no spear so precise as the pages that rest before him. He dares not read them aloud. Even silence here feels dangerous. Each whisper among the nobles seems sharper. Each creak of wood a hidden accusation. He presses the manuscript shut, and in that moment he feels as though it presses him back. An unseen hand, binding him, warning him, drowning him in its silence. The chest waits, a carved hollow, lined with linen. He lifts the manuscript as though it weighs the world, hides it beneath folds of cloth, and lets the lid fall with a sigh that sounds too much like a prayer. His ears strain for footsteps, for voices raised against him. But there is only the storm outside, clawing at the fortress walls, and the faint chant of monks carried on the stone. The scholar closes his eyes. He sees not parchment but fire. He sees the last man who dared hold such a text. His screams cut down in the marketplace, chains ripping his flesh, the crowd spitting curses as if they were absolutions. He sees the pyre, the roaring flame, the ash carried like black snow into the wind. This manuscript is a mirror of that memory. It carries the same death, the same promise of ruin, wrapped in the innocence of words. The hall grows colder. He senses it though the fire burns high. Shadows bend longer, stretching like fingers reaching for him. He imagines the saints upon the banners shifting, their faces lowering, their stitched mouths opening in silent rebuke. He hears nothing, yet in the silence lies the heaviest accusation. For what is more dangerous? The sword that cuts the flesh, or the sentence that cuts the soul? He thinks of kings, those who feast, those who pray, those who bleed their people dry. And he thinks of the ink, that quiet soldier, that silent flame. He wonders which will endure. The storm beats harder against the walls. Each clap of thunder rattles the hall like a drum of war. Each flash of lightning illuminates the manuscript in his mind. Though it is now hidden deep, he cannot unsee it. He cannot forget the way the seal glowed in the candlelight, as if it were alive, as if the parchment itself longed to speak. Above, the choir swells in mournful chant, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. Their voices drip down through the stones like water through cracks. The nobles ignore it, raising goblets, gnawing on bones, their laughter shattering the sacred sound. But the scholar feels the chant pierce him. He feels it bind itself to the manuscript, as if heaven itself calls warning to what lies buried in linen and wood. He grips the chest and leans against it, his body a shield, his breath short, ragged. He is a scholar, not a warrior. Yet tonight he is both. His weapon is silence. His armor is fear. His battlefield is the fragile space between word and fire. He looks once more to the banners, to the saints embroidered in gold and red. Their gazes do not soften. They are not companions. They are judges, eternal and unyielding. He whispers into the storm, a sound so faint it is swallowed by thunder. Forgive me. The night stretches long. Each heartbeat feels stolen. He waits for discovery, for the moment when laughter falters, when eyes turn, when the hall rises against him. But the feast goes on. The lords grow drunk, their mirth louder, their songs more foolish. Outside, the storm howls with greater fury. Yet he knows the true storm is not beyond these walls. It rests beneath linen. It rests in ink. It rests in silence that could undo the world. And as dawn approaches, pale light pressing at the cracks of the shutters, he knows the day will demand a choice: to burn it and bury truth in ash. or to reveal it and watch kingdoms fall. The storm fades with the morning, but its echo remains in his chest. He touches the wood of the chest once more, almost tender, almost afraid, as though touching the pulse of something alive. He whispers no prayer now, only silence. The rain has stopped. The earth smells of iron and smoke, and the world, though unaware, tilts closer to ruin. The library was not meant for warmth. Its stones sweated in silence, and its arches held the cold like a chalice. Dust sifted down in patient descent, each mote a fragment of forgotten time. The chained tomes along the walls seemed less like books than prisoners, their bindings rusted, their spines bowed beneath the centuries. No human laughter had echoed here in generations. Only whispers of parchment, the hiss of wax dripping, the distant hymn that seeped through cracks in the cathedral's bones. The novice hesitated at the threshold, his breath fogging the air as though even lungs shivered in this sanctum. The iron key in his grasp trembled with more than chill. He had stolen it, or rather it had fallen into his palm as if fate had slipped it there. The abbots warned that some doors are locked not for protection but for mercy. He had not believed them until now. The cabinet before him loomed with a presence heavier than stone. Its wood, blackened by centuries of smoke, bore carvings so eroded they looked like wounds rather than ornament. He slid the key into the lock. Metal ground against metal, a sound too loud for the silence. His fingers shook as the teeth turned, biting into his palm with cruel cold. The hinges shrieked like an animal caught in a trap. Inside the book, a manuscript older than memory. The cover curled like skin stretched too far, cracking in lines that resembled scars. The gold along its edges caught the candlelight, and for a moment it seemed to breathe, its illumination pulsing faintly, like a vein beneath flesh. He dared to touch it. The binding was rough, alive with the oil of countless hands now dust. He opened it. The world seemed to lean in. Colors flared, impossibly vivid, pigments refusing to dim despite the centuries. Blues deeper than the midnight sea, reds that glowed like fresh blood, gold leaf that shimmered as though hammered only hours ago. Each letter was a prayer carved into eternity, each margin a battlefield of notes and whispers scrawled by a hand now long silent. But these were no ordinary notes. The novice traced them, lips parting with a shiver. Words of betrayal, of oaths broken and kingdoms strangled by silence. Maps of campaigns never written into history. Laws whispered between monarch and bishop, binding men more tightly than iron chains. He felt the pulse of secrets too heavy to be carried by parchment. A drop of wax hissed upon the stone. He flinched. The shadows bent across the page, making the words writhe as though they refused his gaze. The air thickened, and his lungs labored as if he had descended into a crypt. He dared not read aloud, for he sensed that if he spoke, the cathedral itself would hear, and the saints painted on the glass would turn their eyes. The novice's heart thundered as the chant of vespers drifted faintly from the nave. It sounded far away, as though time itself had stepped aside, giving the manuscript dominion over the present. He could not tell if the words beneath his thumb pulsed with life or if it was his own fear hammering through skin. He leaned closer. One phrase, scrawled in ink faded almost to ash, burned itself into his sight. Non debuit fieri. It should never have been done. The words hung in his skull like a tolling bell. He looked over his shoulder, though he knew no one stood there. Still, he felt watched by the shadows, by the chained books, by the cathedral itself. And then the manuscript snapped shut. The sound struck like thunder in the hollow chamber. His candle guttered, shadows shivered, and the silence that followed was heavier than the shriek of hinges. He had not closed it. The book had chosen its own silence, as though weary of being known. His hands fumbled to lock it away again. The key bit his flesh, drawing a bead of blood that gleamed like the rubies painted inside. He did not wipe it. Some offerings, he thought, are demanded without words. When the cabinet was sealed once more, the library breathed again. The dust fell like snow. The chained tomes sagged as though they had been listening. The novice pressed his forehead to the cold wood and tried to steady the storm inside him. He would tell no one. He could tell no one. To speak of it was to betray it, and to betray it was to summon its curse. Yet in his heart he carried the weight of that unseen history, a burden stitched now into the rhythm of his pulse. He stepped back into the hall, the chant of vespers swelling, its solemn cadence both refuge and warning. But nothing sounded the same. The hymn felt thinner, frilier, as if the truth in that cabinet had hollowed out the world he thought he knew. He walked away, though each step felt treacherous, as though leaving footprints across consecrated secrets. He knew he would never again hear prayer without also hearing the silence of that book. Never see light upon stained glass without remembering how ink had glowed like fire. And though the cabinet was locked, the lock now lived inside him. He carried it into the night, into the shadows stretching beyond the cloisters. The wind pressed against him like a hand, whispering the same words etched in faded ink. It should never have been done. The novice did not yet know what it was that had been done. Only that it had been grave enough to chain, grave enough to bury in silence, grave enough for parchment to remember what men had tried to forget. And somewhere, in the distance of centuries, the consequence of those hidden words was still waiting to awaken. The candlelight guttered out. The cathedral bells began to toll. And with each strike of iron against air, he felt the weight of history following him, step for step, into the darkness that would lead to the next chapter of the tale. The chill of winter creeps through the stones like a slow poison. Every breath turns to frost in the cloisters of the mountain abbey, where monks bend over clay bowls, grinding ink from soot and gall, their fingers blackened, their robes stiff with cold. Candles gutter in iron sconces, their flames shrinking against the draught. Beyond these walls, the mountains brood in silence, their peaks buried in snow, their slopes alive with the hunger of wolves. It is then that the bell tolls, its iron tongue shaking the air with a sound that feels less like a call to prayer and more like a warning. The gate creaks open to a figure staggering from the whiteness. His beard is rimed with ice, his satchel torn and empty, his boots cracked by endless miles of frozen road. His eyes burn with the hollow light of famine. He is more spectre than man, his breath ragged, his soul already half gone. Yet clutched in his arms is no bread, no relic, no child. He carries a manuscript bound in hide, the leather warped and scarred by age and fire, its pages swollen by damp, stained by the dust of exile. He falls into the abbey like a felled tree, collapsing at the feet of the abbot. His body is broken, but his hands still cling to the book. When the monks pry it free, they find it heavier than flesh, heavier than stone. It does not weigh as parchment should weigh. It drags like the burden of centuries, as though each page holds not ink, but blood, not knowledge, but sin. The abbot lifts it with trembling arms, and the chamber hushes as though struck dumb by the storm's hand. The monks gather in shadow, their hoods drawn low, whispering tongues colliding. Saxon, Latin, fragments of the old prayers no longer spoken. The sound of their voices is like smoke, twisting and fading, until silence presses them closer. At last, the pages are unfurled. Drawings of heresies leap out like firebrands, lines carved with fevered precision. Beasts with too many eyes, saints with mouths sewn shut. Hymns bloom on the vellum, not to Christ, but to gods drowned in time, names forbidden and yet here, resurrected. Maps unfold that place kingdoms in the deserts of memory, lands unmarked by any chronicler, where cities are said to stand but never did, or perhaps stood before memory itself began. One monk, his hand shaking, traces the ink of a line written in some half-forgotten dialect, and when he lifts his finger, he finds the ink stains fresh, black as if spilled moments ago, though the hand that wrote it has been dust for lifetimes. He draws back as though burned, whispering a prayer swallowed too quickly by fear. The abbey grows colder. Candles shiver in their wax. Shadows lean long across the stone. The monks dare not speak now, for they know what cannot be destroyed carries a power that will not be denied. Outside, the wolves howl again, sharp and merciless in the night air, their cries slicing through the snow-drowned silence. Yet within the abbey walls, there is a greater soundlessness, a dread so thick it deafens. The traveler's chest heaves once, then falls. His lips part, as though to speak, but only his last breath escapes, a sigh that drifts across the stones like judgment itself delivered. His task is complete. The abbot clasps the manuscript to his chest. His eyes close not in prayer, but in fear. He knows at once what must never be spoken aloud. This book cannot be burned, for fire would only feed it. It cannot be buried, for earth would only cradle it. His words cling like thorns, refusing to die, rooted deeper than faith. And in that moment the monks understand. They are not keepers of the word, they are keepers of a curse. A seed planted long before their birth, carried on the backs of desperate men across roads paved with bones, now left to germinate in their hands. The wolves cry again, closer this time. Snow drifts against the gate, pressing like a grave. But the danger is not beyond the walls. It beats here, in the dark heart of parchment, in the unholy ink that refuses to fade. The abbot opens his eyes and speaks softly, though none can bear to meet his gaze. It has found us, and as the wind howls through the broken shutters, the manuscript lies between them all, its pages fluttering though no hand touches them, as if breathing. The monks draw their hoods tighter, but there is no cloak against the weight of what has come. The night stretches on, long and merciless. Somewhere in the silence between candle flame and prayer, a decision begins to take shape, whether to guard the book, to hide it, to surrender themselves to it. For they know this is not the end of a traveler's road. It is the beginning of their own. And as dawn creeps pale across the mountains, the wolves fall silent. A hush deeper than winter settles over the abbey. The monks kneel, each man hearing the echo of his own heartbeat, wondering not whether God has abandoned them, but whether he ever walked these halls at all. The manuscript rests on the altar now, its hide cover glistening with frost that should not be there. The abbot turns away, yet still feels its presence pressing against his chest, heavier than stone, heavier than death. The traveler lies cold at the threshold, his body stiff, his eyes staring at the ceiling vaults. His journey has ended. Theirs has only begun. And in the stillness of that morning, it becomes clear. What has entered these walls will not remain silent for long. The torch flares to life with a sound like a gasp, its flame clawing against the damp air. Shadows spring awake upon the cellar walls, long and crooked, dancing among sweating barrels and stones slick with mildew. The servant's hand trembles, not from the cold, though the air is thick and chill, but from the weight of what he carries. Wrapped in silk stitched with lilies of gold, the bundle presses against his chest as if it has a pulse of its own, a heartbeat quickening against his ribs. His footsteps echo down the narrow passage. Water drips steadily from the vaulted ceiling, each drop falling like a clock's relentless measure of time. The rats scatter before him, their squeaks fading into the black. He is alone in the underbelly of the palace, where even the guards do not linger. Down here, the scent of rot clings to every breath, and the silence feels dangerous, like a beast crouched unseen in the dark. He kneels, his knees striking damp earth. For a moment he closes his eyes, steadying his heart, listening to the groan of the stones above him. Then, with fingers unsteady, he parts the silk. The manuscript emerges like a relic from a grave, fragile, yet alive, whispering through its ink. The parchment shivers in the torchlight. Its script is not the Latin of the Church, nor the tongue of courtly decrees, but letters twisted, flowing, foreign, carved in shapes that defy his lips. He does not need to read it to feel its power. In the margins, drawings bloom like forbidden dreams. Ships with sails wider than wings, spices drawn in exquisite detail, their sharp aroma almost leaping from the page, and rituals. Circles of fire, hands raised toward stars that do not shine on this kingdom. He traces one sketch with a trembling finger, the charcoal smearing slightly beneath his touch. Feels alive, dangerous. The king has sworn these lands do not exist. The court calls them lies, tales for sailors and madmen. Yet here, in his hands, lies a book that dares to remember what has been silenced, to name what has been erased. It is treasure brighter than any jewel, and heavier than the crown itself. The servant hears a sound, faint, above, a boot scraping stone. His torch crackles as if in warning. He freezes, breath caught in his chest, the manuscript hovering in his hands like an ember about to burn him. Silence returns, but he knows danger stalks near. Discovery is death, not only for him, but for the secret itself. So he acts. He searches the earthen floor, fingers clawing through the soil beneath a heavy cask. The smell of wine and damp wood fills his nostrils as he digs. The dirt cold, clutching his fingernails, staining the silk. A hollow yields to his touch. Into it he lowers the book, as though committing it to the earth itself, a burial without priest or prayer. For a heartbeat he hesitates. His eyes linger on the strange letters, on the promise of worlds beyond this narrow cellar. Then he presses the manuscript down, seals it beneath soil and wood. The silk is swallowed, the lilies disappearing into darkness, as though the earth itself conspires to guard it. The torch hisses as if sighing, sending smoke into the damp air. Shadows collapse around him. The cellar breathes deep, closing over its secret, a secret heavier than iron, older than kings. Above him, the palace will wake to another day of feasts and decrees, banners and prayers. The queen will notice her missing bundle. The king will rage, demand answers, sniff out betrayal. But down here, beneath the stone foundations, the truth sleeps, untouched by crowns and swords. Centuries will pass over this hidden grave. Dust will thicken, stones will shift, kingdoms will rise and collapse like waves upon the shore. Yet the manuscript will endure, waiting in silence, its ink stubborn as blood, its stories sharper than any blade. The servant leans back, chest heaving, the stink of mold filling his lungs. He knows he has given the secret a chance to live, though it may cost him his own life. His torch sputters, the flame shrinking, throwing his face into darkness. The cellar swallows him, and with it, all trace of what he has done. The last glow of the torch reveals his eyes wide, fearful, but burning with something more. Not courage, not rebellion, but the faint, perilous hope that someday, someone will find what he has buried. Someone who will read the words that kings denied, who will draw maps where borders were forbidden, who will remember what the crown demanded to be forgotten. The torch dies. The cellar falls silent, save for the drip of water and the soft skitter of rats reclaiming their dominion. The smell of wet earth lingers, mingled with the ghost of smoke. In that silence, a question hangs, unspoken but alive. What survives when memory is buried? What endures when truth is hidden in the dark? The camera of time drifts upward, through layers of stone into the palace above, into halls of gold and firelight, where the king dines, where the queen wears her crown, where laughter drowns the whispers below. None of them know the earth beneath their feet guards a secret that may one day undo them. The cellar sleeps, the manuscript waits, and the world above spins forward, unaware of the ember glowing in the dark. The mist clung low upon the river like breath held too long, heavy and unwilling to rise. It muffled the lapping of the tide, softened the reeds that bent under its weight, and turned the world to silence. In that silence, a fisherman's oar cut slowly through the water, its wooden blade worn smooth by years of labor. His hands were calloused, his shoulders stooped, his face carved by the lines of hunger and weather. He had risen before the sun, as always, to cast his nets into waters that offered little, yet still demanded much. It was there, where river met sea, that he saw it. A dark shape drifting against the reeds, half hidden, half refusing to be seen. At first he thought it no more than wreckage, some broken plank from a forgotten barge. But as the tide pushed it closer, he saw the iron bands, blackened with rust, and the swollen wood of a chest heavy with water. His heart struck once against his ribs. He glanced across the water, though no other boat was near. With a grunt, he hauled it in, rope biting his palms, the weight threatening to drag him with it into the gray current. When at last he set it on the damp earth of the bank, the hinges wept brown corrosion, and the wood shuddered as though reluctant to open. He wedged his knife into the seam, straining until the lid cracked, swollen fibers giving way with a groan. He expected rot, the smell of decay, perhaps nothing but worm-chewed wood and brine. Yet when the lid fell back, what lay within silenced even the gulls that wheeled above. Wrapped in waxed cloth, untouched by salt or time, was a manuscript. The fisherman's hands, rough with scales and river silt, trembled as he lifted it out. The cover bore a symbol, carved deep, worn by generations, yet still unmistakable. He knew it from tales whispered by firesides, from the half-remembered warnings of elders long gone. It was the crest of a monastery that had burned 2 generations past, its monks consumed in a blaze said to be divine punishment, or the vengeance of kings, or the fury of heaven itself. None could agree, and so the truth had been buried with the ashes. But here it was, unburned, unbroken, lying like a wound reopened. He carried it home beneath his arm, walking quickly, though the river path seemed longer than ever. Smoke rose from his cottage, thin and pale in the damp air. Inside, the fire was low. His wife bent over a pot of barley stew, the scent of onions seeping into the rafters. She looked up as he entered, her brow furrowing at the object he clutched. He did not explain. He only set it by the hearth, where shadows flickered over the waxed cloth like uneasy fingers. That night, when the stew was eaten and the lamp lit, he sat by the manuscript. His wife slept already, her breath steady, the day's fatigue pulling her into dreams. Alone, he unwrapped the cloth, the sound of the wax crackling sharp in the quiet. He opened it carefully, as though the pages might crumble. They did not. The ink was dark, the script flowing in lines he could not read. Yet he traced them anyway, his fingers smelling faintly of fish and river mud. The parchment seemed to hum beneath his touch, as though the words had a pulse, faint and steady, echoing against his own. He did not understand the language, yet he felt the weight of it. His chest grew tight, his breath shallow. His hands hovered, unwilling to turn the page, afraid of what waited. But still he did. And with each new leaf, the silence deepened, as though the cottage itself held its breath. By instinct more than thought, he hid it beneath the floorboards before dawn. No priest must see it. No lord must know. It was not treasure, not gold, not relic nor coin. It was something heavier, something dangerous. Yet when the wind came that night, sliding through the cracks of the cottage, it carried whispers. Low syllables, stretched and broken, but unmistakable. He turned in his sleep, his brow damp with sweat, his dreams blackened with fire and steel. He saw towers burning, their stones cracking in the heat. He saw men kneeling in fields of ash, their eyes hollow, their mouths whispering prayers without sound. He saw crowns, fragile as glass, falling and shattering, their fragments scattered into rivers that ran red. He woke before dawn, heart pounding, his skin cold. The manuscript lay silent beneath the boards, yet he could feel its presence, pressing upward like a weight upon his chest. He dared not move it. He dared not destroy it. Each night the visions deepened. Armies marched through his dreams, banners tattered, faces hidden in shadow. He heard the crack of chains, the laughter of unseen kings, the weeping of women cloaked in ash. He tasted smoke, bitter as gall, and salt, sharp as the sea. He woke with the smell still in his nostrils, though no fire burned in the hearth. His wife began to notice. She saw the lines etching deeper into his face, the hollow look in his eyes. Once she asked what troubled him, but he shook his head, silent. For how could he explain that the wind itself had become a voice, that shadows moved though no lamp stirred them, that parchment he could not read had begun to carve its meaning into his very blood? The river no longer gave him fish. His nets came up empty, as though the waters themselves recoiled from him. The villagers watched him with sidelong eyes, whispering of ill fortune. He grew afraid to leave his cottage, yet more afraid to stay within it. Still, he could not part with the manuscript. When his wife, one morning, reached toward the boards as if to sweep, he seized her wrist too sharply. She drew back, staring at him with fear he had never seen before. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the manuscript whisper in syllables not his own. The river mist returned, thicker than before, pressing against the windows, crawling beneath the door. He thought he heard voices within it, monks chanting, their words endless, circling, inescapable. He pressed his hands against his ears, but the sound lived inside his skull. When sleep came, it brought no peace. He dreamt of a blackened crown set upon a faceless king. He dreamt of fire consuming script, yet the word survived, branded into stone, into flesh, into bone. He dreamt of silence so complete that even his heartbeat dared not disturb it. And in the final image, before dawn bled into the sky, he saw the manuscript closing itself, its pages turning with no hand to guide them, sealing the truth once more in darkness. He woke gasping, the air cold, the cottage still. Yet beneath the floorboards, the silence of the manuscript lay heavier than any net he had ever hauled from the river. The river mist waited at the threshold, as though listening. And beyond it, unseen, a story long drowned was beginning to rise again. The air is still before dawn, the kind of silence that feels older than memory. Only the faint crackle of embers lingers in the hearth, where the night has left its last warmth. Then, like the cry of a restless spirit, the rooster shatters the dark. From the cottages, smoke begins to rise, curling against the pale breath of morning. And there, in a garden still wet with dew, a woman kneels, her hands deep in the earth. Her name is not remembered by chronicles, but the village calls her healer. She gathers sage, rosemary, rue, the scents rising sharp, almost holy in their bitterness. Her fingers are stained with soil, yet precise, as if she plucks threads of fate from the roots themselves. But this morning, as she lifts a stubborn clump of sage, her nails scrape against something that is not stone, not root. A hollow thud. Wood. She stills. The world seems to hold its breath with her. Slowly, she digs deeper, until the shape of a box emerges. Small, heavy, its hinges sealed with a crust of darkened wax. Her pulse quickens. Such things belong not in gardens, not in villages, but in castles, in treasuries, in the hands of men who wear crowns. She pulls it free. The dawn light glints upon it like a secret dared into the open. Her lips whisper a prayer she does not believe will be heard. Inside, calfskin, bound and preserved, its pages whisper against one another like trapped wings. She opens it, and time itself seems to lean closer. Words, ancient, deliberate, bright as if the earth itself shielded them from rot and ruin. Remedies for plagues that once swallowed kingdoms. Recipes of herbs, how to draw fever from the skin, how to break the chains of cough, how to still the black swell of poison in the veins. But among the cures, shadows coil. Spells of invocation. Prayers to saints who were never sanctified. Cautions that one leaf can heal, another can kill, and sometimes both belong to the same root. The fire hisses as she sits before it, lips moving silently across forbidden lines. The smoke of rosemary twists upward, mingling with the taste of ash, with the smell of time crushed beneath her palm. Each page is a knife's edge, for the words could save the village that coughs and starves through winter. Yet the same words, if seen by the wrong eyes, would brand her a heretic. A woman of shadows, a witch, and witches do not die gently. She feels the weight of fire at her back, not from the hearth, but from the memory of pyres. She hears the murmur of villagers in her mind, voices that bless her for salves, for poultices, for the way she eases their newborns into the world. Those same voices, should the priest declare her cursed, would cry out for wood, for chains, for flame. The manuscript trembles in her hands. She cannot tell if it is her fear or the weight of the words themselves. Outside, the sun climbs. Children's laughter drifts across the fields, chasing one another between furrows of barley. Somewhere, a bell tolls for morning prayer. The world goes on, unknowing of the secret unearthed beneath a garden of sage. At twilight, the healer moves with shadows. She takes the book, wraps it in cloth, places it within a jar of clay. She buries it deep, beneath roots that will grow again, as if asking the earth to guard it once more. Her hands press the soil down firmly, as though sealing away not just parchment but fate itself. She lingers there as the sky darkens. The stars bloom, pale fires upon the vault of night. Insects sing their endless chorus. She feels the choice she has made echo through her chest, like a bell struck, reverberating too long, too loud. To keep silence is safety. To speak the words aloud could be salvation, or the end of all she knows. Her garden whispers with the scents of rue and sage, sharp, sorrowful. She raises her eyes to the heavens and wonders. Are these herbs prayers or poisons? Are these pages relics or snares? The night wind answers with nothing but cold, and so she keeps her silence. But silence is not peace. Silence is the weight of secrets pressing against the walls of the soul. Tomorrow, someone will knock at her door with a child burning in fever. Tomorrow, a plague may come with its hollow cough, with its swollen sores, and she will know. She could stop it. She could save them, or she could save herself. The choice will not stay buried. The roots will not keep it hidden forever. For knowledge has a way of clawing back to the surface, as restless as the dead. And beneath that quiet summer sky, with the stars watching like unblinking eyes, the healer feels the breath of history at her back. She knows that her hands have touched more than herbs this day. They have touched fire, and fire does not forget.